Hi, I'm Jarrett Sullivan. Welcome to Downton Revisited. Grab a cup of tea, sit down on the couch, and let's watch Downton Abbey, Season 1, Episode 3. This episode, the big theme seems to be change, both going through it and choosing not to. It's the benefits of both, maybe? So we start off learning about Gwen wanting to become a secretary. Gwen, I love you. And she's in the show and she's amazing. Then she leaves and then she's in Game of Thrones. Oh, you know nothing, Downton Abbey. So Gwen wants to be a secretary, which to us doesn't sound like that big a deal. But at the time, this is when social mobility is very difficult and very new. People didn't change jobs. You were born the son of this, you are this, and then you die this. So Gwen has used all her money to buy a typewriter and has been taking correspondence courses. And she's keeping it secret because she doesn't want to be judged by others. Well, it gets found, so it plants this plot that continues through this episode and next episode, and Gwen is trying to better herself. Though I don't know when she would have time to be taking these correspondence courses. Housemaids worked from 5 a.m. to about midnight and then slept in tight quarters and didn't have a lot of free time to themselves, maybe once a month. So she was either losing sleep or finding quiet moments, and it would be very, very difficult for her to be doing this. But we'll give some dramatic license and let Gwen better herself, of course. Because Mary doesn't want to marry Matthew, we see Edith sadly attempt to woo Matthew by taking him on a church tour. Of course, Matthew is like completely unaware of this, and because Mary is now getting attention from other men, he seems to be starting to understand that he has a thing for Mary. I'd marry Edith. Edith is great. In episode 2, we learned about Evelyn Napier. Evelyn is a man's name, like Evelyn Waugh, writer of Brideshead Revisited. So Evelyn Napier is very wealthy, and Mary finds him interesting, and they've been in correspondence. Cora has her motherly machinations to get all her children married, starting with Mary. Mary's already a little old for the time period. It's not old at all. Invites Mr. Napier, who is with a friend, Mr. Kamal Pamook, who is the son of the Turkish attaché to the Albanian talks. This gives us the time period. The Albanian talks were part of the London Conference between 1912 and 1913, so we know this is probably 1913 at this point in time. And the Gwen plotline continues, and Gwen has a moment of despair.
I'm the daughter of a farmhand. I'm lucky to be a maid. I was born with nothing and I'll die with nothing.
Mr. Bates steps up.
You can change your life if you want to. Sometimes you have to be hard on yourself, but you can change it completely, I know.
This gives a little hint toward Bates being something different in the past that we're going to be learning about, Bates's problems in the future, and it makes us love Bates more. He's really the stand-up guy. Oh God, Bates is so good. Then the whole theme of change. Bates has his limp and walks with his cane and gets a lot of flack for it, even though he seems to do his job just fine. And so he decides to buy a limp corrector. Medicine at this point in time, very accurately, is kind of sketchy. This guy just makes this thing and advertises it that it corrects limps by straightening the leg so that the foot can reach the floor, as if like a strange bend is the reason for the limp. We know that Bates was wounded in the Boer War, and that's why he limps. But he gets this correctional brace, and it does nothing but cause him pain. And that plot continues to where they finally, Mrs. Hughes confronts him and says, we gotta show me what this is. We see the nasty leg, and she tells him and convinces him.
Well, here goes.
Do you not think we ought to say a few words?
What? Good riddance?
That and your promise.
Very well. I promise I will never again try to cure myself.
So we have two conflicting plots with change, though both of them are correct. Gwen is improving herself, while Mr. Bates was attempting to change something that he can't change, or he should just accept. So both sides of this lesson. Something that I think is very proper and right and not anachronistic is the casual racism in this episode. If you think about how racist people are now still, and you go back 100 years, it's not ill-meaning. Mrs. Crawley's reading a letter and she says,
Turkish diplomat called something I can't read.
That's terrible. So that's just casually racist of a character who we know is good and kind and very sweet. And then before Mary meets Kamal Pamook, she says,
And I can see him now, a funny little foreigner with a wide, toothy grin and hair reeking of pomade.
I wouldn't quite say that.
It's so bad. It's so, and just so, you know, she thinks nothing of it, but then he shows up and he's beautiful. I lost the footage. So this is a little different. Had to shoot this on a different day. Sorry, it looks a little bit different. Was that too shocking? With the introduction of Mr. Pamook, we now come to one of the largest plots of the series. This goes over multiple seasons. It's Mary's shame, though from our modern perspective, it's really silly, but a sign of the times. Mr. Pamook seduces Mary over the day. She probably hasn't really had this type of attention before from a foreign stranger. He's very different from what she's used to, so all that lies in his favor. Once again, Thomas's homosexuality comes up. Mr. Pamook is aware of it, and Thomas is flirting with him, and he flirts back. And then Mr. Pamook blackmails Thomas with this information because Thomas could be arrested for being homosexual. So after dinner and after all the events of the night, Mr. Pamook comes to Mary's room, and this is where a complete lack of sex education comes into play. Mary has no idea. She's not in this realm at all. She knows nothing about sex and very little about her own body, I would imagine. Mary asks some rather obvious questions about sex.
When it hurt, is it safe?
Trust me.
While Mr. Pamook is kind of a creeper in this scenario, he doesn't force her, and she agrees to be involved with him, and then he dies. It's like the worst of all possible scenarios. We have Cora, Anna, and Lady Mary moving a body in the middle of the night. It's so dramatic. And then, of course, Daisy sees a little bit, and all this leads to great intrigue. From our modern perspective, this is all very ridiculous. Great line from Lord Grantham.
We must have a care for feminine sensibilities. They are finer and more fragile than our own.
But of course, we know with the dramatic irony that these are tough women, these are strong characters, they're not frail in any sense of the word, and Lord Grantham, maybe he's not quite in touch with the reality of things. Also, Mr. Pamook's death leads us to the Dowager Countess Quote of the Week.
He looked so well. Of course, would happen to a foreigner. It's typical.
Don't be ridiculous.
I'm not being ridiculous. No Englishman would dream of dying in someone else's house. Especially someone they didn't even know.
Maybe one of her best. She's so awesome. All this does reveal a lot about Mary's character. She's been playing very wicked. She's had kind of an attitude the whole time we've seen her. She is feisty and she doesn't take anything laying down. Like, she fights for what she believes, but we haven't seen her vulnerable like this. That's a big thing for us as the audience. It changes our perspective. But also we see the change in Mary, and it's going to precipitate a change in Mary's behavior going forward. She's going to find a way to not have this bring her down as a person. So we see that change. I am really enjoying this rewatch. I hope you are too. Come along and join me on the next episode. If you could click over here, there's a subscribe button. That would really help me out. Also up here, my Disney review show, Opening the Vault. This week we reviewed Cinderella. You can watch it right here. Click on it. Subscribe to that channel too. That would be amazing. You can find the links in the doobly-doo for everything I've done. I'm Jarrett Sullivan. Thanks for watching.